Gregg, let me go to you first. It seems that one thing that did weigh in on Susan Collins' decision was the FBI report, which, of course, Republicans were hesitant to get into until we had that dramatic moment last week when Senator Flake made his move in that direction. One thing that apparently came out of this, or at least is in some way related to it, was the information that, in fact, Leland Kaiser, who was a friend of Dr. Ford, was being pressured by some other friends of Dr. Ford to change her testimony or modify her testimony to make it seem like she did remember something that she said she didn't remember. I mean, there were some pretty damning elements in what we know about this FBI report.
Or at least what we're hearing secondhand.
What we're hearing, yeah.
Yeah, we can't see what's in it, but it does seem that senators were concerned by some of the things they learned from the report, not about Judge Kavanaugh, but about the efforts to interfere with his confirmation. There are a lot of questions after this whole process about what Democratic senators knew and when they knew it, how they were working with lawyers for Dr. Ford, who appear to be politically connected lawyers. I mean, I think there are many questions that still need to be answered, and we'll probably be having this conversation in the coming weeks and even months.
I'm sure we will. Anneke, then there was Judge Kavanaugh himself, who began the morning with an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which, among other things, said, "I was very emotional last Thursday speaking to his testimony," where he really gave some senators a piece of his mind. He said, "I said a few things that I should not have said. I hope everyone can understand that I was there as a son, husband, and dad." Well, not everyone does understand, including a former Supreme Court justice who criticized him and said that disqualified him from serving on the bench because he got so emotional and political.
Well, and he said during his testimony, when he had the interchange with Senator Klobuchar, he followed it up after the break by apologizing to her and said, you know, this is a tough process. I'm sorry. I felt like, you know, he went too far. And I think that his op-ed, he's acknowledging what I saw at the time as him responding to the fact that he was testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee about his personal character. This wasn't about his record. When people say this was a job interview, he was so unprofessional. No, he was being accused of some pretty horrible things and had not been given a chance to really speak to it. And I think we saw that emotion. Well,
Gregg, should Judge Kavanaugh become a justice, and it appears now he will, in the Supreme Court, will all of this affect his term?
I hope not. I hope that with time, more Americans will get past this really divisive period and take some comfort in this additional FBI review. I think we're going to learn more about the shadiness and the fabricated nature of some of the charges that were made against him. So I hope with time there'll be some healing. But there's no doubt that America's very divided, and they're divided about some of the big questions the court considers. And there's going to be some lasting damage, I think, to our national conversation about the Supreme Court and the Senate as well.